So the first question is, how does one continue to do things for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake and have true tawakkul without running into self-doubt or anxiety? Do you have any particular steps?
Bismillah. So first of all, awesome question. Second of all, self-doubt and anxiety, and even the very aspect of questioning our sincerity and our intentions is a positive sign, because it means that we care about our deeds and we care about our sincerity. And I'll share with you one of the most beneficial incidents that occurred with me in my time studying Islam. When I went to Medina to go study, the whole program is about 6 years. So like a 2-year diploma in Arabic and a 4-year degree. So that's pretty much like the minimum that someone would spend in Medina. And so I went to Medina, and I'd never lived in that part of the world before, born, raised in America. So it was just living in Medina, living in Saudi Arabia was actually very difficult for me, because it seemed like it was a very foreign society to me. And they had their own problems and issues or whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But it was very difficult for me. And so I looked ahead and I said, I've got 6 years of this. And then I remember, subhanAllah, in one of my first classes in Medina, we studied the hadith of the first 3 people to enter the hellfire. And the first 3 people, if you don't know, to enter the hellfire are not somebody who committed zina, somebody who, stole or lied or whatever, this or that. The first 3 people to enter the hellfire is someone who in this life, they sacrificed, they struggled for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or supposedly. That's the message. Like they struggled. Number 2, a person who gave charity, supposedly for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number 3 is someone, in one narration, who learned and taught the Quran, and another narration, somebody who learned and taught the religion of Allah. And they're brought on the Day of Judgment, and they're brought in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah questions them and says, you did such and such, you gave charity, for example, why did you do it? And the person will say, oh Allah, I did it for your sake. And Allah will say, kadhabt. That's not true. You only did it so people would say, look how generous this person is. You only did it so people would say, look how brave this person is. And by the way, this hadith is even more relevant in our times. With the rise of social work and activism, which is, alhamdulillah, an awesome thing, right? Just as we purify intentions for learning the Quran and giving charity and so on and so forth, likewise, activism has to be done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, perhaps, may Allah protect us, we don't want to be amongst those first 3 people who enter the hellfire, right? So someone who struggled and sacrificed, spoke truth to power, right? And Allah will ask this person, why did you do it? And they'll say, I did it for your sake, oh Allah. And Allah will say, no, that's not true. You only did it so people would say, look how brave you are, right? And likewise, a person who learned the religion and taught the religion, Allah will question this person, why did you do it? And the person will say, oh Allah, I did it for your sake. Allah will say, no, you lie. You only did it so people would say, look how knowledgeable this person is. Look how wise this person is, for the recognition. And these 3 people will be dragged on their faces to the hellfire, right? Which is like a horrible, horrible thing, right? I'm sitting here, my first year at the University of Medina, and I'm like, so you're telling me that I could spend 6 years of my life, perhaps more, in a very difficult environment, doing something that is very difficult for me to do, and after all of that, I'm like the first homie to enter the hellfire? And that really bothered me. Like I was ready to pack my bags and go home. I was like, I'm done. Like I'm not going to do this, because I don't need that response. I don't want that responsibility, because I don't know that I can ever be 100% sincere. Like what human being can guarantee their sincerity? Right? How many of us can say, I'm 100% sincere 100% of the time? I think it's impossible. I can't do that. I don't know about you, but I can't guarantee that. And so I went to one of my teachers, I went to one of my sheikhs, and I said, Sheikh, I'm going home, right? Like I can't do this. And the sheikh, he said, why? And I said, look, I don't know that I can be sincere all the time. Like what if I have a lapse? What if somebody praises me and, as a human being, like we like to be praised. We like the recognition and so on and so forth. So what happens? Like I don't want to be the first person to enter the hellfire. And he gave me, once again, like these are one of the most important words that I've heard in my time of studying. He said to me, he said, look, as long as you're concerned about your sincerity, know that you're doing okay. But the moment you stop being concerned is the moment that you're in trouble. Concerned in two ways, or stop being concerned in two ways. There's usually two reasons why we stop being concerned. Either we're like, I'm good to go, right? Like, I don't need to worry about my sincerity. I never need to check my sincerity. I don't need to work on my sincerity. Just keep doing what I'm doing. Or we don't even think about it. Like, we enjoy the recognition and so on and so forth so much that we don't even think of it. So we're not worried about it. Khalas, then you're in trouble. Number two is if we give up hope. If we lose hope and say, I'm never going to be sincere, so what's the point? And therefore, we don't worry about our sincerity. We're like, I'm just not going to do the action. In both of those paths, we need to be worried, right? Because, and by the way, the second path is the path that the shaitan wants to lead us down. And sometimes shaitan attacks us through the door of sincerity or insincerity. The shaitan will come and say, you're not sincere, why bother? Like, why are you doing this? If you're going to, once again, the first person to enter the hellfire, no thank you. Do you really want to do that? And so we end up leaving the goodness that we are doing. I know people who have left major acts of worship because of that, right? So people like, I know like back in the day when, beards weren't like popular, it wasn't like the hipster thing to do. Beard, like brothers would show up and shave their beards and I'm like, what happened, man? I just want to make sure, I don't know if I'm doing it for the sake of Allah. So until I can do it for the sake of Allah, right? I'm just gonna, whatever. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. We keep doing what we're doing. Because we don't know, perhaps it is one moment of sincerity, just one moment, that saves us, that sends us to paradise. One moment. Wallahi, we don't know. It could be one single sajda that we have made with sincerity. Like we're in sajda, we're crying out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're sincere, we're like, oh Allah, accept me. One sajda. Isn't the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala greater? Wallahu akbar. Right? It could be one action, one deed that we have done sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that saves us. It's actually a hadith of the Prophet said, إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَا يَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ لَا يُلْقِي لَهَا بَالًا. That a servant of Allah may say one word, one statement, not thinking much of it. And this statement is from, Allah says, Prophet says, مِن رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ, it's from the pleasure of Allah. And this person is raised in status in paradise because of one statement. Like we say and we do too much, and I know usually it's on the other end, right? We warn people of being insincere and so on and so forth, and we get afraid of doing things. I don't think we should be afraid of doing things. We should be working on our sincerity. And that's a spiritual struggle. Like no one in the world, no one can make you sincere. Because that's something that I don't have access to your sincerity. You don't have access to my sincerity. That is you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why we often say we don't judge people's sincerity because we can't. Like, I don't know what's in your heart. You don't know what's in my heart. Even if somebody's actions, I've seen this online so much, subhanallah. Oh, this person's only doing it for attention. طيب انت فتحت قلبه يعني did you open his heart and you checked and you saw that they're doing it for attention? How do you know that? And perhaps somebody is doing it for the intention, right? Attention, perhaps. But intentions change like this. القلب يتقلب, the heart changes. So perhaps in one moment a person is insincere, but in the next moment a person becomes sincere. So now we are the one who has spoken ill of our brother and sister. We have lied against them. We have slandered them, which is a major sin. Because maybe they were doing it for the attention, but now they're not. The heart changes so quickly, right? So we don't know, and that's why it's a constant battle. It doesn't, like I said in the talk, it's not something you just turn on or turn off. And I know people don't like to hear that answer because it's not an easy fix. But Islam is not. I'm sorry, it's not an easy fix in these matters. Right? It's a journey that we're on. It's a spiritual journey, first and foremost. Yeah, in our lives may be full of success and failure and so on and so forth. But in terms of our spirituality, that's a constant battle. It's a constant struggle. So that's what I'll say. Like, look, it's just something that we have to constantly not worry to the point that we lose hope and leave the action, but worry to the point that we keep moving. that we keep trying, right? And even that's why, I often talk about positive regret and negative regret after committing a sin. Positive regret is a type of regret that leads us to seek forgiveness. Positive regret empowers us, like we feel bad, so we want to do even better, right? Negative regret is from the shaitan, because the shaitan says, oh, you messed up, you're a messed up person, so just give up, right? So a person commits a sin and they're like, yeah, I feel so bad about it that I'm just not good enough, and they just leave. They lose hope. Likewise with our sincerity, right? That it's not the purpose of my talk, and I really hope that's not the message that I gave. It wasn't to make us feel horrible to the point where we're like, you know what, I just can't be sincere, and if I'm not sincere, what's the point? Like, no. The point is that we have to keep trying. Like, it has to work side by side, and that's why the more challenging our work is, the higher level of spirituality we have to have, right? That is just if we're doing things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why one of the first instruction that was given to the Prophet ﷺ was قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, right? The first thing, stand the night and pray. Why? Because he had a huge responsibility ahead of him. There's a lot that he had to do. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ, it was mandatory upon him to pray the night prayer, because his responsibility was bigger than anyone else. So if we're taking on a project, or we've taken the lead, or we've decided to speak truth to power, and that's not easy, wallahi. Like the brothers and sisters who have taken on that responsibility, like hats off to them. Like I can't, wallahi, it's amazing. But at the same time, like they need Allah more than somebody who's not taken on that responsibility. And even in da'wah and teaching and so on and so forth, we live in a world where, subhanAllah, da'wah has become very it's almost become like a celebrity thing, right? And like just hashtag real talk. And I have kids come up to me sometimes and they're like, hey, I want to do what you're doing. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, get on stage and have people listen to you. I'm like, no, right? Like that's not, you cannot seek knowledge with that intention, right? Because that's not, the more we're doing, the more we're in the spotlight, the more we're responsible for. There's more that we have to be working. And that's why somebody who doesn't have both sides of the equation, they're going to be imbalanced, and it's very problematic when somebody who is either teaching or learning, or whether it's activism, anything, and that spiritual component isn't there, then it maybe not now, but at some point it's gonna come, and it's gonna be a problem for them. And maybe in this life, maybe they do find that success, but what about the more important part, right? The afterlife. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.